Hey everyone, this is Richard Yi from the Austrian Perspective. Today is April 27th, 2012. It has been a while since my last video recording, so today I'm going to really cover something that I found pretty interesting with you folks. If you have paid attention to global financial markets, especially in Europe, then you're pretty much immune to any negative news because you hear that every day, just as today. Right, this morning we have news coming out from Spain saying that their unemployment rate, the government official unemployment rate, has reached 25%. Right, just to put that in perspective, well, what does 25% unemployment rate even means? That's something like four Spanish people, right? There's one guy who's unemployed, right? And also, this is the government report. And we all know how accurate those government reports, actually are, right? Well, the way the government accounts for unemployment, global-wise, is to count how many people receive the unemployment benefits, right? Well, but this unemployment benefit does not account for people who are too depressed and gave up, searching for work, right? Therefore, the unemployment rate is inaccurate. And what about the youth? Right here, I'm not just talking about the Spanish youth, but youth in general, right? Here we have whole generations of youth who never have much work experience, and 10 years down the road, when they graduate from university, they're not gonna have any job experience. All they're gonna have is like a whole load of student debt and a useless degree and the skill of cranking through a whole bunch of exams, right? Just how do we expect, kids like that to carry on the baton of supporting, this retired generation? That's a really big question that I think is worth pondering. So why are unemployment rates so high, right? To answer that question, we have to answer two more questions. The first one is, who creates jobs? And the second one is, why are they not creating jobs, right? Not who. First of all, businessmen and entrepreneurs create jobs, right? Well, why are they not creating jobs? Well, to answer that question, it's actually pretty obvious if you pay attention to the financial markets in Europe, right? We all know European governments, due to their fiscal imbalances, more or less face really high borrowing costs, right? When they face really high borrowing costs, that push up the interest rate in general, right, in the Eurozone area. Therefore, businessmen are hard to get loans, and since there's no much faith towards the credibility or towards banks, savings is also down, right? So when savings really low and therefore lending will be really low, what happens to businessmen? Businessmen can get loans, right? They need loans to expand business. When they can't get that, they can't. And since we have a lot of regulations from governments, such as minimum wage laws and other laws that really increase the cost of doing business, therefore businessmen are really reluctant to start and expand businesses. However, the solution to all those problems in Europe is really tough for the people, because it requires government cutting spending on all those welfare programs that none of those countries can afford them. Right? European countries are based on, there are societies based on a welfare state. Right? They have the state providing healthcare, free education and whatnot, but they cannot afford it. Right? So all of a sudden, when there's required necessary cuts to first balance the books of the government, therefore borrowing costs can come down. In order to achieve those goals, there must be spending cuts, right? But when there's spending cuts, the people are going to suffer, because their lives, in the past, say 20 years, all based on the welfare state. When all of a sudden the welfare state is gone, maybe partially gone or fully gone, depends on what degree of cutting is required, those people's life gonna get affected, right? And that's the painful part I'm talking about. However, that's the necessary medicine that the European people have to swallow, and those government politicians have to swallow as well. Because if they don't do that in the future, it will be more painful to cut as people more rely on those welfare states. If those countries refuse to accept the reality and keeps borrowing and live beyond their means, what's going to happen is what happened in the past few months is going to play all over again, right? We're going to see, those poor countries, I mean not poor, but in debt countries, they're going to receive bailout money again. And their yields might come down a bit, but soon they're gonna come up because face it, their country cannot afford all those borrowing, right? All those borrowing will only incur more debt on their balance sheet. And let's take a look at the United States, right? Its situation is no much better than the European nations, right? The only reason why United States can keep the pace of debt accumulation increasing while having a severe debt problem is only because it can print dollar. And as other main creditors to the United States, such as China, Japan, Great Britain, when they gradually lose interest in the treasury bonds and turn their attention to gold and other real assets, such as oil and whatnot, the Federal Reserve is going to step in to buy those treasury bonds more severely because, face it, right? Someone has to finance the US government if it doesn't cut spending, either the Chinese or the Federal Reserve. And as all government money printing business, eventually it will lead to inflation. We're already seeing that in food prices and of course energy prices, and eventually on many other prices as well. However, those price increases are not accurately reflected in CPI data published by the government. Well, of course, the CPI is constructed with a bias basis. That's why it's not reflected. But eventually, people are going to accept the reality that, hey, there is inflation, right? I mean, even the Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke, now already admits that, he's going to, able to accept a 2 to 4% inflation, I believe. But hey, the main purpose of the Federal Reserve when it was established was to keep a stable prices and a booming economy, right? Now it's already the chairman's already accepting a 2 to 4% inflation, and eventually the Fed has to raise interest rates, right? Unless it wants the dollar to collapse, and when it happens, the U.S. government is in big trouble, right? The only reason why the U.S. government now can barely survive on the borrowing Ponzi scheme, I should say, is because the interest rate is really low, right? So the cost of maintaining those debt is relatively low. But when interest rates start rising, the U.S. government is in big trouble, right? It can't maintain this debt with the low cost like before. So I mean, it has to dramatically cut the spending, and when that time happens, the U.S. economy is gonna suffer. And that's it for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be blogging again soon, guys. Take care. Bye.